Welcome to the first in a series of videos where I break down my specific predictions for what we will and will not see in each episode of Season 1 of the Wheel of Time TV show. I have previously done a few videos where I shared news, including casting announcements, social media posts, episode titles, leaks, and more, and used that to speculate more generally on how the books would be adapted. Now I'm going to dive deeper and give you episode-specific breakdowns. I'm only covering episodes 1 and 2 today, so if you enjoy this kind of blacksmith puzzle, make sure you are subscribed and have the notification bell turned on so that you won't miss future breakdowns. I'm a small YouTube channel, so YouTube really doesn't promote my content. If you want to help others find this, you can like, comment, and share wherever you interact in the Wheel of Time fandom. I first have to acknowledge the Brown Aja detective, Geeky Eri, and the incredible work she does sleuthing all of this information that I'm using to help speculate in these videos. Other content creators like me are really indebted to her and to resources like watseries.com. You're going to want to check out her video series if you want all of the details on how she tracked down this information and her own speculations. So she's covered production blocks 1 through 3 so far. In case anyone needs a quick explanation, a production block is the way to streamline production for a show. In this case, all of the production for episodes 1 and 2 was completed in a single block, sharing a director and other creative and behind-the-scenes staff. So the scenes that take place in any of these 2 episodes could be filmed in any order, but we would not get into filming episodes from later in the season unless there was a really specific and compelling reason why something had to be filmed at a different time. So when I say production block 1, I'm referring to the period of time, 8 weeks, where all of episode 1 and 2 was filmed. That covers from September 16th to November 8th, 2019. And this really helps us speculate about what we will and will not see in those episodes. For instance, the actor playing Thom, not at the table read for production block 1. Say what? No Thom? More on that later. Now, before I get to episodes 1 and 2, I want to cover 2 general points that can apply to my overall thinking for how this season is going to be structured and things that could apply to potentially any episode in the season. On April 4th, I published this video where I made my case that season 1 would cover book 1 plus some expanded storylines and flashbacks from the prequel New Spring. I added to that speculation with this video on July 26th, where I brought in some new information that I felt supported my theory and pretty much debunked the more popular theory that season 1 would cover all of books 1 and 2. So to clarify, my opinion hasn't changed. I still think that the climax of The Eye of the World will take place in production block 4, which is currently being filmed and which will include episodes 7 and 8 of season 1. This would leave very little time to get into Great Hunt material. Now, I'm not saying we won't see any Great Hunt material, especially if they get creative, but I think it will be limited. So if you are someone who still really is convinced that we're going to see all of books 1 and book 2 in season 1, I highly recommend you check out those 2 videos as well. The other topic I've discussed extensively before is the idea that we would see some expanded storylines and perhaps extensive flashbacks to fill out book 1 material in season 1. In general, I still think that, but my thinking has shifted on it a little bit. The evidence we have so far really supports the idea of an expanded storyline for Logain specifically, and there are several Aes Sedai and Warder characters who seem to be connected to his storyline in season 1. We can't really say for sure that there are any other expanded storylines because there's at this point no specific evidence for it. Now, Logain's storyline appears that it will not begin until production block 2, episodes 3 and 4. So you're going to have to wait for that video for more details on that. As for flashbacks, I do think there's enough evidence, which I will just go through with you briefly, to show that there will be some flashbacks, and we can therefore speculate on what those might be. but when they would take place in the season is almost impossible to pin down. First, I want to mention that I'd previously talked about the casting of Karine Nagashi and her warder, now named Stepan, played by Claire Perkins and Peter Franzen, as evidence for New Spring flashbacks, because these are New Spring characters. However, with the information we now have with when they were filming, as well as some social media interactions, I think it's a much clearer picture now that they have actually been moved into the main timeline. More on that in later production blocks, because that doesn't occur in the first one. But I did want to just mention that in case you're wondering why I wasn't talking about that in the context of flashbacks. From this point on, I'm going to throw up a spoiler warning because I'm going to start getting into specific plot points from the books, but I'm only going to cover through the Eye of the World and New Spring in this video, so if you've read at least that much, you're safe to continue watching. If you're watching this video, you probably know who Rafe Judkins, the showrunner, is, but he was asked about 1 year before filming began on Twitter what he thinks of flashbacks in general, and he responded he thinks they're a great way to get to know a character. So I do think it's a good bet we will see some use of flashbacks and as a way to build out a character. We also have good reason to believe that Moiraine, played by Rosamund Pike, will be the central character in season 1. This is supported by press releases about the show, as well as the fact that Rosamund Pike will be getting top billing in the cast. Here's a relevant quote from the press release that I'm referring to. The story follows Moiraine, a member of the shadowy and influential all-female organization called the Aes Sedai, as she embarks on a dangerous, world-spanning journey with 5 young men and women. Moiraine believes one of them might be the reincarnation of an incredibly powerful individual whom prophecies say will either save humanity or destroy it. In terms of other actors who are as well known, we do have Sophie Okonedo playing Swan and Alvaro Morte playing Logain. They're up there, and there is good evidence that both of those characters will get a little extra focus as well. But Moiraine is naturally going to be more central to the plot of season 1, and if any character would benefit from flashbacks, it would be Moiraine. We have a very solid rumor about the casting of Kira Chansa to play a young Swan. We don't have any knowledge of a similar casting for a young Moiraine, but it stands to reason that we just probably don't know about it yet. Now, it could be that Kira will be playing young Swan prior to going to the White Tower and would not include Moiraine. But honestly, it would be a bit strange to get a flashback of young Swan and nothing else. So I think it's more likely that we will see Kira playing a novice in the White Tower. And this more recent picture of her, I think, shows her a little bit more appropriate looking for the age of a novice. And then maybe we'll see that first meeting between novice Swan and novice Moiraine. And if we're going all the way back to that meeting, maybe we'll see flashbacks from them at other periods in time. It would fit in with my idea of gradually revealing the secret mission that they're on together over the course of the season, and perhaps exploring their relationship as well. So do we have any other specific evidence for any character aside from Swan and maybe Moiraine fitting into flashbacks? Not really. I will remind you about this photograph that Jennifer Chion Garcia, who's playing Lyanna, posted of her carrying the book New Spring. Lyanna was friends with Moiraine and Swan at the time of New Spring, so she might fit into a flashback. But it's also possible that she just wanted to read the book as part of reading the series. So keeping in mind that flashbacks might or might not occur in any episode throughout the season, let's get to what we do know about episode 1. Through script reveals, we know that episode 1 is called Leave Taking and episode 2 is called Shadows Waiting. And here are all the confirmed cast members who we know were filming during Block 1. I'm just going to read the character names for you. Moiraine, Lan, Nynaeve, Mat, Rand, Egwene, Perrin, Tam Althor, Padan Fain, Laila Aybara, Danya, Bodhi and Eldrin Cawthon, Jeffrem Bornhald, Aemon Valda, Master Hightower, Abel and Natty Cawthon, Sen Bowie, Meryn and Bran Alvear, and Daze Conger. We've seen photos of the Emmonsfield set, as well as a brief video of the Wine Spring Inn. And we have statements from Rafe Judkins that we will see Rand and Tam on the Quarry Road, as well as Beltane festivities. That's a bit interesting. And we also know that the crossing of the Tarn River by ferry actually occurs in episode 2. So that really puts the limit on how far the plot can advance in episode 1. The characters could leave Emond's Field, but if so, the episode would probably end on their departure and not see them get as far as Tarn Ferry until probably early in episode 2. So outside of the possibility of a Moiraine flashback, which I don't think is all that likely, it seems like the entirety of episode 1 will take place in the Two Rivers and maybe almost entirely in Emond's Field. So what will happen? The biggest event that this episode is likely to be centered around is the Trolloc attack, including its setup and its aftermath. Now, how would those Beltane festivities fit into that, which we don't see in the books? It's possible that we'll see some of the Beltane festivities moved until the day of Winter Night, just because we can. It would be interesting to see them. It could be that we'll stick around in Emond's Field a little bit past Winter Night and therefore get to see some of those festivities. Or it could be that the attack itself is shifted to the night of Beltane. Any of those are possible. It's really just speculation at this point. The other major thing that has to happen is we have to see our main characters make the decision to leave Emond's Field with Moiraine and Lan. Because I know some people are asking this, I'm just going to go ahead and say, for very little reason, I think that Nynaeve is going to leave with the main group from the beginning. I've thought this all along, again going back to the press release suggesting that Moiraine is looking for one of 5 young people, not specifically 3 young men. Maybe we're not going to know right away that the dragon has to be a man. Or maybe Moiraine knows, but she doesn't say it yet. She could just be interested in Nynaeve and Egwene because they can channel, but not tell them that yet. And we're going to need to see all 5 of them make the decision, not just Rand as it is in the books. The show is not going to want to single Rand out like that from the beginning. So we should see scenes of Rand and Tam, and to balance that out, we should see scenes of Egwene with her family and Mat with his family. Nynaeve in the books and apparently in the cast doesn't really have a family, unless for some reason they've decided to cast this woman, possibly called Danya, played by Nana Agye Ampadu, as Nynaeve's sister or something. Otherwise, I think she could be a member of the women's circle. There's likely to be village scenes involving characters like Daze Conger and Sen Bui, and perhaps when Padan Fain arrives to give his news would be a good way to include them. And so she could be a character in a scene like that. She could be a character in a women's circle scene with Nynaeve. Maybe she's even the woman that Nynaeve leaves in charge when she decides to go. If she's not an Emond's Field character, only other possibility I can think of is that maybe she's a character in Baerlon in episode 2. I can't really think of anything else that's likely to be in these 2 episodes where we would need a new speaking role to come into play. So I've talked about scenes with families, etc., to help us get introduced to Rand, Mat, Egwene, and Nynaeve. I haven't talked about Perrin yet, so let's get to that now because that's a bit more interesting. We don't have any confirmed cast members that are family members of Perrin, and we also don't have the blacksmith he's supposed to be apprenticed to, Master Luhan, or his wife. We do have a very solid rumor about the casting of Helena Westerman as a character called Laila Aybara. The most common piece of speculation I've seen on this is that she will be playing Perrin's wife. And because this is a character that does not exist in the books, it would make sense then for her to die on Winter Night, and that would contribute to Perrin's reason for leaving the Two Rivers. Now, I had previously speculated that maybe we didn't know for sure that Helena's character would be called Laila Aybara in the books. At this point, though, I would say she almost certainly is playing a character called Laila Aybara. Whether her exact role in the show will be a wife or another family member, I cannot say for certain. The only other viable alternative theory I've seen suggested is that she could be a sister, particularly if Perrin was adopted by the blacksmith's family. The problem is we don't have any casting or even rumors to support that theory. But one way or another, we certainly will have some scenes between Laila and Perrin. As for Moiraine and Lan, I think we're likely to see more of the Trolloc attack in the village, so we'll see them involved there. Perhaps we will see Moiraine healing Thom as she does in the books, and perhaps we will see her telling the story of Manetheren. Now, let's get to episode 2 before we talk about what's not in these episodes. In episode 2, we will have the group fleeing through the two rivers, probably pursued by Shadowspawn. We will see them cross the Tarren by ferry, and we know from a leak that Master Hightower, the ferryman, dies. And this is a change from the books, perhaps to make Moiraine appear more dangerous. We will see the group traveling through the wilderness, and then the question of how much, if any, of Baerlon will we see. One person we will not see in Baerlon, apparently, is Min, because it appears that Kai Alexander was not filming during this block. I got into that a little bit more in this video, and I will also talk in future block videos about what I think will happen instead. Now, the presence of two White Cloak characters at the table read does suggest that we might meet White Cloaks in Baerlon, though it doesn't have to be Baerlon. My guess is we will see Baerlon, I just don't know how much time we will spend there. A White Cloak encounter could encourage them to move on before they've even spent one night there. While I think it's possible we might see a bit more, that's purely speculative, so I'm going to save that for a minute.
If you follow WatchSeries.com, you might have seen this recent discovery of some Egwene Audition scripts. And because these are audition scripts, they are not going to be the actual language that's used in the show. There's undoubtedly some changes. But there are scenes that show interactions between Egwene and Rand and Egwene and Moiraine, and there's a reference to another scene with Egwene and Nynaeve. And I mention it here because these are all scenes that seem likely to occur in episode 2 if similar scenes are going to appear in the show. There's nothing specific enough in these scenes for me to make a firm prediction for you, but you can still check them out if you'd like.
From there, we can expect that Shadowspawn will overtake the group, probably forcing them to fight and change course to head to Shadar Logoth. The title of this episode suggests that they will at least arrive in Shadar Logoth, whether or not we get all of those scenes in this episode or not.
I wanted to quickly bring in a couple of filming locations that look like they might be relevant for Shadar Logoth scenes. The first is the St. Wenceslas Church in Visluni. It has a pretty dilapidated look. It's a very old church, and so it does seem like it could be appropriate for one of the buildings in Shadar Logoth. The second is this old mill that has even more of a ruined look. The only thing that makes me hesitant that this is also for Shadar Logoth is that we know a scene was filmed here with wolf dogs. And if that were the case, it would mean wolves are being introduced slightly early and in a different way than they are in The Eye of the World. But it is possible that they would want to introduce wolves in a way that we at first don't really know what they're doing there or their connection to Perrin. Perhaps Perrin unknowingly draws them to himself in his fear in Shadar Logoth.
Now, it's possible that the episode could end just as they're arriving in Shadar Logoth, or it could end with the group splitting as they try to escape. There's really no solid evidence either way. Similar to the first episode, I think the focus will stay on our main group. We will be introduced to at least 2 more characters, possibly 1 or 2 more. And outside of the, again, slim possibility of a Moiraine flashback, there doesn't seem to be any B-plot happening yet. Now let's talk Thom. We know that the actor playing Thom, Alexandre Wilhelm, was not at the table read for episodes 1 and 2, as we would expect, based on when his character first appears in the books. We also don't have any social media confirming him to be in Prague during the time of Block 1 filming. We know, for instance, that he was busy filming The Head in Spain and Iceland for the first 2 weeks of Block 1 filming. Then we only really know his whereabouts sporadically through the month of October. And then we know that he was heading to a new show, possibly The Wheel of Time, on November 12th, and home again on November 16th. That's during the first week of Block 2 filming. Then we have him back in Prague on November 21st for costuming.
On that day, he made a couple of social media posts, his first tagged Wheel of Time, and these were quickly deleted.
And he remained in Prague from November 24th through December 6th. His casting was finally announced on December 4th. So there's 2 possibilities to consider. The safest assumption is that Thom's introduction in the show is being delayed, and his character will only appear in episodes 3 and 4. Now, the other possibility, which I don't want to entirely rule out, is that he was there for some part of production for Block 1. He couldn't be at the table read because of a scheduling conflict, but he could have been there at other times and kept his involvement under wraps because his casting had not been announced yet. But why would they want to delay the introduction of Thom in the show? The only reason I can come up with that makes some sense is they would want to avoid introducing too many characters in episode 1 and want to give Thom's character a little bit more focus when he is introduced. Now, personally, if I wanted to do that, I would also want to balance it with making sure we have enough time to spend with Thom in season 1. If we spend too little time with him, will there be much of an emotional impact if he does sacrifice himself for Rand and Matt? Now, my instinct is that if we were going to balance these two concerns, that the best bet would be to introduce him in episode 2 in Baerlon by having him perform at an inn maybe and then get swept up with the group, very much as it is in the book, where he's going with them ostensibly to get away from Shadowspawn, but in reality to try and protect Rand, Matt, and Perrin. Now, just to reiterate, I have no evidence that this is what they actually did. I'm just throwing it out there as one possible way that Thom could be introduced in Block 1. I do think it's pretty unlikely that he's going to appear in episode 1 in Emond's Field, to be honest. But I will leave further speculation about what might or might not have changed about Thom's story for the next video, where I will cover Block 2, and we know that Alexandre Wilhelm was filming. So leave me a comment and let me know what you think about these potential changes in episodes 1 and 2. Are there any that worry or excite you? Is there anything else you think we might see that I could have missed? And be sure to stay tuned for future videos. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. See you next time.